Very good evening and welcome to The Bottom Line, a wrap of some of the top business news stories of the day. My name is Nzinga Kunta, and as usual, we begin with your number of the day. Today, that number is 12. That's the amount of flights that national carrier SAA has cancelled today. The airline says it's in the process, and I quote, of consolidating selected domestic flights between the airline's main hub, Tambo International Airport Johannesburg, and Cape Town, as well as between Johannesburg and Durban's Shaka airports. So when I say it's 12 flights, I don't mean 12 single flights today. I mean 12 flights on certain routes. So those flights are between the 20th and 25th of January 2020 and include international flights. The cancellations come as concerns grow about the 2 billion rand needed by business rescue practitioners to implement their turnaround plan for the airline, with unions NUMSA and Shaka expressing their distrust that government will find that money. As they say, both the Minister of Finance, Tito Mboweni, and Public Enterprises Minister Pravin Gordhan have expressed interest in closing down the airline. The Department of Public Enterprises says it's working with National Treasury to find the money. SAA says the process of business rescue, together with these cancellations, represent a responsible strategy to conserve money and optimize the airline's position ahead of any further capital investment. Let's stay on this story. I'm now joined by SAA's Chief Commercial Officer, Philip Saunders. Thanks so much for your time on SABC News this evening. You've spoken about these cancellations as a consolidation, but many comments are that this is just the inevitability of SAA eventually closing down.
Well, good evening from Pretoria. And also, thank you for pointing out the actual number of flights that are being cancelled, because the reality is that today we've cancelled 2 flights between Johannesburg and Cape Town, 3 between Johannesburg and Durban, and 1 international flight between Johannesburg and Munich. It's quite normal for airlines to review operations and where there are low load factors to consolidate flights. And the situation at the moment is that if you take the Cape Town route, we're currently flying A350-900s, that's our new state-of-the-art Airbus aircraft, on the Cape Town route before transferring them to international flights. And that actually increases the capacity on the route. It means there are more seats than we usually need. So by consolidating flights, we can look after our customers. In fact, many have only been delayed between 30 minutes and an hour by putting them either on the flights operated by SAA or by our sister airline Mango. And we are looking after all of our customers. We have thousands of customers every day. And the reality, to give you the absolute facts of the matter, is that during the cancellations yesterday, we actually only had 13 customers who we were not able to reaccommodate. So we're looking after our customers, and at the same time, we're being responsible, doing what we always do, which is reviewing our schedules, and in this case, consolidating flights at a time, it's true, of significant challenge to the airline.
Speak about that significant challenge. Do you have an indication of how far those discussions are between the Republic of Public Enterprises and Treasury to secure that 2 billion rand that's said to be needed in order to implement SAA's turnaround practice?
Well, the first point, I think, is that at this moment, we're working incredibly hard to ensure the absolute necessity of maintaining a platform from which we can build a strong SAA. And that means a restructured, viable SAA. So to go back just to the earlier point, obviously when we consolidate flights, it's one of many measures that have been discussed with and authorised by the business rescue practitioners to conserve cash and to make sure that we're in a strong position when we have that restructured, viable airline. Everybody's working incredibly hard, the business rescue practitioners, the government and the management and board of SAA, to make sure that we have that sustainable future and that we create a bridge to the moment when that additional funding, which we do require, is received by the airline.
I spoke to unions earlier on, and NUMSA in particular expressed the view that this money is being delayed because the Minister of Finance has on many occasions spoken about how there isn't a need for SAA and that it may be a vanity project. And they also attribute the sentiment to Public Enterprises Minister Pravin Gordhan. So they say perhaps there's not political will to the solutions that you're speaking about.
Well, I think the fact that you're covering a few cancellations by SAA and the consequences that has just actually underlines how important the airline is in serving the people of South Africa. That's what I'm focused on as the Chief Commercial Officer of SAA, making sure that we can illustrate to the government and to other stakeholders that the airline has a future, but obviously it's a restructured airline and we must make sure that it's viable for the longer future. If we can do that, then the airline certainly has a future.
Talk to us about the future of employees at SAA, because there have been murmurs that retrenchments are almost certainly on the card in this restructured SAA.
I think it's very important to understand that when you're going through a restructuring process of this nature, the business rescue practitioner works on a number of options to look at the future. And evidently, SAA will be a different airline. And in communication, it's been clear that there may be changes, not only to our route structure, to other aspects of the airline, but also relating to the aspect of employment. But what we're focused on is making sure that, as I say, we receive the funding, we continue to offer excellent service, which is what all of our staff are doing, so that we can actually preserve as many jobs as possible. And it's not just at SAA, it's in many other related industries around the airport and around the country, in both the travel trade and in tourism.
You've spoken about how this consolidation is part of a bigger plan for restructuring. Could you tell us perhaps if there are deadlines for these measures that you have to implement to get the funding? Because there's a sense of panic, particularly among consumers who may be thinking about flying with SAA but are uncertain, despite assurances such as the ones that you're giving now, that they will be able to fly in the coming weeks.
Well, I'd like to point out, first of all, that in terms of our customers, we're very grateful for their loyalty. If you look at the Christmas and New Year period, we had full flights. And if you look at our projections for this month, we're expecting 69% of all of our seats to be occupied by customers who are loyal and proud to fly SAA. I'd also like to take the opportunity to thank the travel trade, and particularly the travel agents around South Africa, who in these trying times continue to support us. So I think there's a great deal of pride in SAA, and the customer base is there, and it will remain there, and it's our objective to make sure we put in place plans that serve those customers for the future. In terms of the timelines that you talked about, obviously funding is a very important consideration. We're working to conserve our cash, to be the bridge, to make sure that that restructuring is possible. And then in terms of timelines, the business rescue practitioner has to actually present a full restructuring plan by the 29th of February.
Okay, so SAA Director Martin Kingston resigned. One of the reasons attributed to him for that resignation was that he didn't need to be there because the business rescue practitioners are essentially taking over and turning around the airline. Give us a response to that, and also perhaps to the fact that people are calling, then why is the rest of the board there?
Well, I think that, as I've said already, the business rescue practitioner is involved in every aspect of what's happening at SAA at the moment. That's what happens when you go into business rescue. And I think you'd have to address Martin in terms of his opinion in regards why he left the board. I can tell you that the board continues to function. It plays an important role, and the board, the executive management, are working very closely with the business rescue practitioner to secure the best possible outcome for South African Airways.
Philip Saunders, the chief from SAA, joining me in studio there. He's the Chief Commercial Officer. Thanks so much for your time on SABC News this evening.